this process began for me meeting with Count My Vote back in October, the beginning of October. And I invited him to sit down at the table with me because it was clear that negotiations between Count My Vote and the Republican Party had collapsed. It was my understanding that there were certain provisions that Count My Vote had asked for, and if the party would have agreed, the initiative wouldn't have gone forward. So the entire basis of Count My Vote is how to get citizens' participation elevated, how to get greater participation, increased participation in the election process. It is my belief, based on the data, that when you have a state that has a one-party dominant political landscape, that voter participation, Utah is about in the middle of the pack, and the other states that have a one-party dominant are direct primaries. So I didn't believe that simply moving to a direct primary would increase citizen participation. It hasn't manifested itself in the other states that have, like we could cite several that are one party, either Republican or Democrat, with an open primary or a direct primary. So the genesis of this bill began with those provisions that Count My Vote had clearly communicated to the Republican Party, and they've reiterated that in quotes in the media as recently as today, that if the party would have adopted those changes, those amendments to their internal nominating process, that Count My Vote would not have brought the initiative forward. So the starting point for this legislation was to take all that Count My Vote was demanding, and in addition, the issue of unaffiliated voters, allowing those who are unaffiliated to vote in any party's primary, Republican, Democrat, or any other party. So now we're at the point where the bill has been introduced in committee. It passed unanimously out of committee today. I have asked multiple times for Count My Vote to sit down and to negotiate in good faith. But the legislature can't continue to negotiate against itself. The original bill, as presented and passed, does meet the very real goal of greater citizen participation. The questions of Senator Valentine and others about the 2-day window for voting in caucus, let's make sure we understand this doesn't impose anything on parties. What the bill says is that Count My Vote, the very language of the initiative, would be the default direct primary nominating process if a party chose to not make some amendments. And it's voluntary for the party. They can either choose to make those changes or not. And if they choose not to make those changes, Count My Vote would be the statutory default of a direct primary. If they choose to make those changes, and we could review what they are. Number one, allow a broader window of opportunity to vote for a delegate. Some of the concern is that single moms or working moms, whatever, that they can't attend the caucus night, but they still ought to be able to vote for a delegate. The second provision says that strengthening the precincts, that a party should be allow a delegate to cast a vote in convention even if they can't show up for the convention, or conversely have an alternate delegate like both Republicans and Democrats do at the national conventions. Third, open the primary. The party would have to agree to open their primary to allow unaffiliated voters. Today, if you walk into the primary election and you ask for a Republican ballot and you're not a registered Republican, they will say, are you unaffiliated? They'll check the voter registration. If you're unaffiliated, they'll ask you to check a box on a registration form and hand you the ballot. What this does is merely take away that requirement to check the box on at the polling place when you ask for the ballot. And then the fourth one, the Republican Party, the state party is at 60%. Count My Vote had asked for a 70% threshold to avoid a primary, and through negotiations with the party, it was my understanding that Count My Vote had agreed to a 65% threshold, and the state Republican Party rejected it. But each of those four criteria are specifically targeted at greater citizen participation. That was a goal of Senate Bill 54. That's what I was told by Count My Vote. That's what they've held themselves out from the very beginning. They want to increase citizen participation, and I don't believe that merely going to a direct primary will change that level of participation significantly.
Have you read that Count My Vote?
I have. And
On to the third paragraph, it says you're intentionally trying to nullify citizen participation,
No.
comparing that to the grandma bill.
not at all. Well, Grandma, there was concern it came out late. There was no debate. There was no committee hearings. This bill has been out for a few weeks. The discussion with Count My Vote began last October. The bill has had a full committee hearing. We had over an hour hearing this morning. It'll come to the board next week, and whether it passes from second to third, I'll ask leave of the body to put it time certain so that the public will know. We'll ask for time certain probably Thursday so that everyone will know when that bill is going to be debated in the Senate. And then if we're fortunate enough to pass it out of the Senate, it will go to a House hearing. Those were the allegations of 477, but there's more in this press release, Dennis. Registered voters in Utah should be able to vote on every qualified candidate. I couldn't agree more. Today, any qualified candidate, anyone who's qualified under the Utah Constitution to file for office, can do so outside of Count My Vote and outside of any party nominating process, because any citizen is able to file as an unaffiliated candidate. What Count My Vote is attempting to do is dictate to the political parties that the political parties no longer have a say in who they would want their nominees to be. But in terms of taking away any right of a citizen, neither Count My Vote nor Senate Bill 54, neither of those affect any citizen's constitutional right to file for office as an unaffiliated voter and for any citizen to vote for that candidate. The question is, should political parties have any criteria for their candidates to reach the ballot? That's really what's at play here.
What about the idea that the legislation nullifies a citizen initiative or petition ballot initiative?
When Count My Vote attempted to negotiate with the Republican Party and those broke down and they brought forward their initiative has significant errors, internal flaws, language that should have been deleted that was not, duplicate wording that makes it virtually impossible to understand what they're trying to do, as well as a whole host of punctuation and things that, whether there's a period, a comma, a semicolon, make a difference in how a statute is interpreted. When you have an initiative process under Carter v. Lehigh, the Supreme Court held that both the legislative process and the initiative process are of equal weight. That was Senator Valentine who litigated the case. We're faced with a dilemma. We have an initiative that has significant flaws in it. We had negotiations that broke down between the parties, and so this was put forward as a true compromise proposal that would give both sides something that they could claim victory. Count My Vote gets more than what they previously were willing to bargain for. And Dennis, a question about the citizen's voice. Was Count My Vote speaking for those same citizens when they agreed with the Republican Party? Or when they proposed to the Republican Party that they wouldn't go forward with an initiative if certain things were met? Or are they speaking for the people now? I know one thing, the legislature does speak for the people. We have to pass through an election, and if what we do up here the citizens disagree with, we have to stand for election every 2 or 4 years.
Doesn't that go to their complaint, though, that you don't actually stand for an election with the public, you stand for an election with the delegates first?
As a Republican, that's true. But that begs the question of any citizen qualified under the Constitution has the constitutional right to file for office as an unaffiliated voter. And what Count My Vote is trying to do is they're trying to circumvent what the political parties would set as any minimum criteria to carry the party's trademark or the party's banner going into an election. So no, this isn't undoing the voice of the people. But the legislature, under that scenario, does that mean that anytime any group of citizens, whether they are the wealthy elite of the state of Utah or just activists, if they say we're going to run an initiative, that on the subject matter of that initiative, the legislature would have no standing in representing the people?
Any other question?
Well, in a broader sense, the legislature here has often tried to limit or impede the initiative process. Is this another of those battles where...
Not at all. The genesis of this bill, Senate Bill 54, started with the legitimate attempt of Count My Vote to affect changes in the nominating process. And I applaud Count My Vote. Without Count My Vote coming forward and bringing forward their proposed initiative, and it's a proposed initiative because the people it hasn't been on the ballot. They haven't announced that they've qualified for signatures. This is an idea that they're putting forward, and based on that idea they're putting forward and the significant errors and flaws in their language, I personally believe that it's appropriate for the legislature to do our constitutional duty, and that's what we're doing here.
You know, I'd like to add something on the question about the level of people on the initiative, and I think Senator Bramble handled it very well. One of the real challenges you have, and I've drafted probably as many bills as anyone, is I think I have a pretty good idea of what I want. And so I draft my bill, I introduce the process, and the process teaches me things. And I amend my bill because I find out I didn't know everything, I didn't think of everything. The trouble you have with an initiative, and in fact I drafted the bill that required the public meetings. And that was with the intent that people could get input, like we do in the legislative process. Look at their language and change their language and conform it. And so what you'll hear if the initiative gets on the ballot will be, well, don't worry about the wording, the mistakes that are in a petition, because the legislature will fix it. The legislature, and it is, we can fix it because it's not constitutional, it's only statutory. But we learned a great lesson when the initiative passed about the policemen keeping the fruits of their crime, of the arrests they were making. There were changes, and the minute you touched it, these people came out of the woodwork and said, ha, you're messing around with the people's choice. And so the problem when you say the people's choice, I don't know how many people who signed the petition have actually read it. You see what happened in California. I mean, my daughter called me a while ago, 150 something initiatives on the thing. And what people do is they hire people to go out and get signatures and get on the ballot, and then you get around. Thank goodness we can't do constitutional amendments in Utah. The initiative process, as Senator Bramble said, has been very good to get us thinking, working about it, but as you look at the bill, I think if anybody honestly sat down and read it and said, I don't think I really wanted exactly with the mistakes and stuff in it, the legislature will have to fine-tune it. Those are the same people, when we go to touch it, will come screaming back and saying, don't you touch anything of that, because that's the voice of the people. I was told that nobody from Count My Vote was there to speak against the bill. And as I said on my tweet, it's interesting, you'll do it by public relations, but you won't do it face to face. And that's my real concern about what Count My Vote's trying to do, is they're trying to do it all by public relations rather than going out meeting people face to face. And I think that's been the real value of the caucus process we now, is you have to get out of your car and go and meet people and talk to people and explain to how your positions are, rather than a stage thing that I'm sorry to say is becoming a national norm.